SpotlightOnPodcast.com/store is the place to go to get a Spotlight On collectible for the music and arts lover in your life, or maybe even yourself. Go to SpotlightOnPodcast.com/store today. Hello and welcome to Spotlight On, the podcast featuring musicians, writers, innovators, and ideas shaping music, arts, entertainment, and culture. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. Today, the spotlight shines on a cellist who's helped redefine what a string quartet can be. Dorothy Lawson and the group ETHEL have spent years breaking down walls between classical, jazz, rock, and world music. On March 13th at New York's Carnegie Hall, Dorothy teams up with bass legend Ron Carter to reimagine his landmark Kronos Quartet recording from 40 years ago, featuring arrangements of music by Thelonious Monk. Dorothy shares how ETHEL has evolved through 4 generations of musicians, their unique residency at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and why making deeply human music matters now more than ever. So now please welcome Dorothy Lawson. Well, thank you for making time. I think you might be the busiest cellist in show business.
No, I don't think so. If you knew the New York scene, man, yeah, we're a tribe. We do a lot of that. That's where ETHEL began. That's what we grew out of, was this beautiful, crazy mix of cultures and styles and opportunities and media, and allowing that to really be an inspiration. I would say there are many people to whom it's just too much. Just, no, I really want to specialize. I'd rather have a more dependable environment. But in New York, if you enjoy it and you benefit from it, you will get opportunities like no other. You'll really have a range of experience and connections, relationships that personally have meant everything to me.
You're already touching on a lot of the themes that I wanted to get into with you, but one that strikes me right off the bat is ETHEL seems to me as though it's a uniquely New York phenomenon, or not that it couldn't happen anywhere else, but in lines with what you were just saying, the New York just represents such a confluence of creative music and jazz and contemporary, composition, and of course the institutions that are there. Does that resonate at all, or is that nonsense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. To be fair, I would say that every city is like that. We're all unique. We all have opportunities. We all have limits. We all have institutions and personalities, people who tend to dominate the scene. Yeah. I think that the thing that really grounded me in New York, and the thing I fell in love with about it, was that it's less xenophobic than a lot of places. It's like you are as much a New Yorker the moment you put your foot on the street and you start walking down. You're as much a New Yorker as anybody else. We'll treat you completely the same. And we expect that there are, engagements where we don't understand each other's languages, or we come from different religious perspectives, or people have their feelings about that, but we basically tolerate everybody. We tolerate each other. And I think there can be human environment. I've lived in a couple of human environments where the expectations are more limited and there's more of a resistance to that kind of modulation that has to go both ways. It's more of an insistence that there's a dominant way to do things and you're just going to have to, work with that kind of thing.
Yeah, more than anything else, you have to work with New York. I'm from the Northeast originally. I grew up in Connecticut. I spent about 20 years in New York, and there's a handful of experiences that New Yorkers have in common. One of them is that bizarre phenomenon we all exhibit where we could be in the middle of New York and we run into somebody that we hadn't seen in like 20 or 30 years. That's one of the strangest tropes that comes up from people who spend time in New York.
Yep. That's real.
A crazy one.
That is real. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But something else that struck me, and it was just this morning, was I saw the announcement of your shows in the spring with Ron Carter.
Yeah.
So
one show.
Congratulations.
One very special show. One very special show.
Oh, one show.
Yeah. Yeah, one night only. It's
one night only.
We're so excited and grateful. And I've known Ron for about, 25 years, something like that. I've known him a long time because one of his projects is his jazz quintet with 4 cellos up front. He calls it his nonette, the Ron Carter nonette. And I've been one of those cellists for a very long time and loved it. Loved it. Again, it's one of those things that just grew out of the New York opportunity spectrum. And I knew well one of the cellists who had originated that group. I mean, the group itself has existed for more than 50 years, I think. But I knew one of the original cellists, and he would need to repopulate the group now and then. And he invited me, and I was delighted. And I've done it every time I could since then. So Ron is the most amazing, lucid, generous, genteel, elegant, brilliant, of course, person and musician. And in this phase of his life, he's now 87, I believe. He, of course, is continuing to perform. He's traveling. He even did a tour to Japan just a couple of months ago. Where he can, he is giving advice and lending support to younger artists. And he is on ETHEL's board. He's one of our board members. He is a steady both contributor of energy and information and ideas. And when we proposed to him that we do an event playing with him and make it our benefit for this year, this is going to be a benefit concert to support ETHEL, to help us keep our lights on. And he was absolutely delighted. And he's the one who came up with the program, music that he recorded 40 years ago with the Kronos Quartet when they were first building their brand. They did a series of records with eminent jazz musicians. And the one that they recorded with him was arrangements of music by Thelonious Monk. So he's very proud of that record, but they never played it live. So he was saying to us, hey, how about we do this? And we're like, oh my gosh, that's the best. It's the best. We're thrilled. We get to do something which is musically significant, historically significant, in partnership with one of our favorite musicians of all time, and celebrate him, celebrate Kronos, celebrate Thelonious Monk, and celebrate ETHEL. So it is one concert at Carnegie's Hall, which is their downstairs medium-sized venue. And it's on Thursday, March 13th at 7:30 p.m. Please, anybody who's available, we would love to have you there. It's going to be epic.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Did I read correctly that this is ETHEL's first time playing Carnegie Hall? Tell me I got that wrong.
Yeah, no, I know. I get the feeling, I've never really known, I think ETHEL has been, in a way, too populist for Carnegie. Right from the beginning, our music, our composers, our style was deeply related to rock and pop and jazz and world music, and we weren't standing on ceremony. We felt that the historical string quartet canon and the composers who really followed in that path were already very well represented, that they had many of the best performers in the world continuing that tradition. And we felt that our opportunity was to do music by the people who had been pushed aside, but I guess their music wasn't as accepted in academia. Of course, they've won their place. I'd say since then they have won their places. We just found that very exciting. We thought that was valid. And one of the first, probably the very, very first project we did together, where we hadn't identified as a quartet yet, was some original music for string quartet to accompany dance with the Pennsylvania Ballet. And the composer, his name is John King, has a uniquely expert way of bringing Delta blues sound to the string quartet. So we played this music together. We enjoyed each other very much. We had several performances with the ballet. And every night the piece was finished, the audience would clap the dancers off stage, and then by protocol, of course, then we stood up and we would leave. But the audience would give us a separate ovation, which was great. We were thinking, this is fabulous. They liked us. They really loved the music. And we liked each other. We were thinking, well, this is ready for prime time. This is ready to go.
Who assembled the quartet initially then? Did the composer bring you together, or like how did that, what's the big bang there?
We actually had two opportunities pretty much at the same time. One was a recording project, and that one, they had approached one of the original violinists, Todd Reynolds. So he called this group that he thought would be fabulous for this. It was a jazz recording, and he called us together to play for it. Simultaneously, John King went to the other violinist who was in this group, Mary Rowell. He and Mary had known each other for years and years, and it was this blues-based music, and Mary called the same group together. So that was really kind of fun. We just thought, hey, we like each other. This is going to be good.
Yeah, you can't ignore that when it keeps working.
Yeah.
In the decision to sort of stay together and continue beyond the initial project, I'm kind of curious about, the New York new music scene of the mid-late 90s. What was going on? And as an ensemble, like, did the four of you see a lane that you could uniquely fill? Was it this populist approach that you saw missing? What was kind of the call to arms, if you will?
We live with some of the residue. The 20th century had really driven itself into more and more of these very sort of specific academic corners, and that was, I would say that was largely economic. Composers made reasonable livings in academia, in colleges. But one of the byproducts, the side effects of that, they made good money. They got time in the summers. They get more sabbaticals. They get breaks so they could really do their creative work. But one of the side effects in academia is you have to publish, and you have to defend your reputation, your position among your peers. So the composers and academia were becoming more and more self-referential. Thanks to the academic environment, they were less sensitive to and less attached to the attendance and interest and buy-in of the audience. There were these growing separations where I know for myself, I played 20 years after college. I played 20 years of music that was very, very hard to relate to. It was very hard to perform, but it was also for an audience, an extremely specialized kind of experience, and highly intellectual. It was exhausting for one thing, because, you're not getting a lot of warm response on your performances. And I think it was misguided. I think that years and years of extremely fine compositional thinking was siloed in this area where I'm not sure how much of it is really ever going to come back. And what was happening at the end of the 20th century was that the economics underneath that were breaking down. The presenters, the environment where you have to make money at bringing people in for their experience, for their entertainments, their audiences were not showing up. The audiences sort of said, I don't get it. I don't relate to it. It doesn't really refer to me. I don't need to spend this money. So the presenters were getting very scared. They weren't able to reignite the interest in their audience. And I think there was just a moment, where everyone agreed, we got to try something new. It's going to be a little different. We'll see what people will buy a ticket for, what they're responding to. At that moment, we were among those early adapters. We had already begun. We wanted to. We were interested in playing music with popular references, with colloquial musical language. And honestly, our first big break with management was a big company that just came to us and said, "Hey, let's try this." And they put us out there. They sent us out on like the national tour. We were busy, but it wasn't very scientific. It was just, they look cool. They're doing something that relates to popular music. Let's try that. But they're classical. They're okay. They're acceptable, but they're doing this other thing. And it was true. We all had all the training, all the right credentials, huge amounts of experience with straight classical music. but we were really sympathetic to, eager to play music that related to the sounds that we ourselves enjoyed and the sounds we had grown up with. So that was kind of the thing. I think it is worth remembering that it is a business, and that the economics and the exchange with an audience is entirely about, what do we do that you need? What can we provide that you would pay us for? And so we pay very close attention to what the audience is really demonstrating when they choose their entertainment.
It's really interesting because in some regards, you could almost imagine an alternative universe where, first of all, that context you provided on how the role academia played both positive and how it created some of the current challenges in the music was really helpful for me. But you could really imagine an alternate universe where, it wasn't that long ago where what I would put in air quotes, high art, was in the popular consciousness through figures like Bernstein or Itzhak Perlman or even Baryshnikov. There's a piece in the New York Times today about, is Mikhail Baryshnikov the last high art superstar? And it really it sets him in that lineage of people who could transcend popular and esoteric. And it's fascinating.
Oh, for sure. And justly so. I mean, I worked with Baryshnikov for several years. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. This does relate to my age and my parents and the generation that I grew up with. They had lived through the Second World War, and there was that kind of burst of abundance after the Second World War. But there was also a lot of PTSD, that people were traumatized. It was a terrible conflict. It was worldwide. Families, I don't know if there were families anywhere that weren't touched by it. And there really was a kind of a despondence after the Second World War that maybe it would happen again. People almost thought, when will the third one happen? And I have come to believe that this super sacred, reverential environment that we've created for classical music was a healing technique. People were worried and scared, and there was that thought that humanity was at its nature so bad, so evil, so destined to continue these warring and self-annihilating habits, that humanity was bad, just evil, and were temples of a different belief of like restoring the faith that humanity could also do the highest good. That for a lot of us, the high, gorgeous art of museums and fine performances and great music was something to hold on to, something to believe in. And I think that's where that environment, where the old guard would be so offended if young people came in and weren't reverent, if you weren't dressed right, if you didn't sit quietly and listen and applaud at the right moment, that was such a highly coded set of conditions that I guess the best I've come to, the most sympathetic, explanation of it that I've come to, is that it was actually really restorative, really helped people feel good about who we are, what we're destined to do, and
wow.
Through the 80s and the 90s, and then kind of up to the breakdown around 2000, the business model around music, around presenting of almost every kind, I think, but certainly in classical music, was a star system. It was a conscious business strategy. Let's focus our advertising dollars, the audience's attention. Let's get a group of these superstar guys. We'll pummel the audience with their names. There's no accident, American Express ads, everything, there's no accident that everybody knows Yo-Yo Ma. There's no accident. And I love him. I love him to death. But I know that there were many other talented people whose careers were kind of like capped off just because there wasn't room for another star.
Right, we could only have one cellist at a time.
Exactly. We have more stars. The money goes down. The revenues go down. If we've got that one big name, the orchestras will pay top dollar to get that person and then sell the rest of their season based on that reputation. Orchestras everywhere were buying into this. They would spend $100,000 on Itzhak Perlman and sell the rest of the season to the audience as a package. Yeah, you can, you get all of this and this thing. for this combined price. And that worked for years and years and years. And we know the names. We could go down the list. We know exactly who was being promoted: pianists, violinists, one cello, singers, but it was efficient. And I know people who were held in those management rosters without getting any bookings at all because it kept them out of the way. They weren't competing. They weren't out there trying to get attention in the environment where we were promoting these stars. The stars are fabulous. It's not a qualitative statement about them. It's just that I feel that that star system of promotion cost us many other voices and careers. And fine, it was the metrics. The 80s were the time of the first eruption of MBAs into our economy, and they were changing the way people thought about their jobs, about their business. If you weren't making maximum money, you were stupid.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it also created, I hate to say it this way, but I'll use the shorthand and we can unpack it if need be, but it created a new class of money where some of these these were signifiers of having made it or refinement. So going to the symphony and being able to recognize Yo-Yo Ma was probably a helpful thing for some of these people who were sort of cultural day tripping.
Exactly. Well, do you, oh gosh, I won't be able to remember their name. There was a big advertising firm that broke in the 80s and changed the way everybody promoted things, like by lifestyle. Just what you're saying. The one of the first big successes was Ralph Lauren. They didn't advertise so much the pieces, the individual garments, or it was the lifestyle. Look at how these people live and look at the clothing they're wearing. It's like,
Yeah. So, I heard an interview on another podcast the other day and the guest said the marketing is the product.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. And I didn't know if that was insightful and like useful information or if that made my heart break a little, but it certainly, it resonated. Yeah. We'll be back with more Spotlight On and Dorothy Lawson right after this break.
After listening to this episode, head to thetonarm.com, our new online journal covering unexpected music and culture. This week on The Tone Arm, jazz clarinetist Anat Cohen discusses the musical fusions found in her band Quartetino. Renowned Swiss trumpeter Franco Ambrosetti straddles the worlds of business and bebop. Lawrence Purrier commemorates the podcast's 5th anniversary by looking back at the first year of Spotlight On. And we honor innovative pedal steel player Susan Alcorn with an interview from the archives. You'll find all this and more on The Tone Arm. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter. That's thetonarm.com. The Tone Arm, putting a needle on the cultural wax.
And now, back to Spotlight On. Something else I wanted to ask you about. It's so interesting to talk to you about your experiences with ETHEL because it can tie into so many different sort of not only genres, but ways of being as an ensemble. And by that, I mean, oftentimes when you talk to people in creative music or certainly in jazz, it's difficult over time to keep a lineup together because people have to work. And so you might have your quartet that plays on your album, but when you gig, there might be a sub and maybe the audience cares, doesn't care. Just the idea of longevity of an ensemble, it seems like such a treasure and such a nice thing to have as a group of people. How does that manifest? Either will I recognize that as a listener, and even less important to me as a listener, what does that do for the four of you?
Wow, this is amazing! What an invitation! When we began that original foursome, it wasn't like we had a full calendar. We had done a couple of events and we loved it. And we started telling composers, hey, we're doing this thing. We want to do this. We got invitation here and there, but we weren't making a living at it. And so on top of just staying busy and doing other things, we started having meetings. We were discussing the identity thing, what kind of who do we want to play? How do we want to operate around this? But among other things, we got some coaching from a theater director, a man called Gideon Shine, who was fascinated by the group, loved music and performance and theater all together, but started just giving us really experienced advice about running a company. What are the factors that make your life richer or more difficult? And one of the things that we developed with him was this sort of manifesto of who we wanted to be. It wasn't only music. We had lots of other experience with other performance art forms. And we wanted to embed that in our thinking, our statements about ourselves, that we could do anything we wanted to. Everybody in the group could bring their ambitions into the center and we'd all deal with it. It wouldn't be only Music Man, and you can see, I mean, we've done several shows that are really much more multimedia through design, it is a different journey for sure, but that made it possible for us to imagine getting older, going through life changes, seeing things happen and incorporating them, actually working with them. And I guess the current membership are, of course, we now have we have 4 generations in the group, right? I'm the oldest. I've always been the oldest. Ralph, my other co-founding member, is the next. Then we have the 2 violinists. And so we've got me in my 60s, my colleague in his 50s, and then the violinists, one in his 40s, one in his 30s. And the worldviews are so different and so interesting, and we do have to spend time visiting and talking and reacquainting ourselves with each other, just as life continues to give us new challenges, new thoughts, new opportunities.
Yeah.
I do feel that this membership it's now 10 years old, the longest ETHEL we've ever had. I think it is newly mature and can carry statements and musical phrases, musical projects much deeper than we have in the past. We do more styles better. We're patient about the details. We can get even deeper into what makes music unique, what makes a specific piece really special.
Yeah. You mentioned 4 generations. What jumped out at me when you said that was just the opportunities for repertoire. Like now you've got 4 generations of people and their knowledge of music and their knowledge of, it's almost, you compensate for each other's interests, blind spots, inclinations. Like this, it's just a wide net you get to cast. And then as sort of a corollary to that, it strikes me as what a wonderful opportunity just amongst the 4 of you for sharing, like somebody bringing a piece of music or you bringing a organizational or life. Like it's just, that strikes me as a very resilient organizational model, whether you intended to have 4 people of dramatic age differences or it worked out that way. That seems pretty potent.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I would hope as I'm getting older and I'm aware that I will at some point probably choose that the traveling life is no longer what I aspire to focus on. That is my wish, my kind of dedication is that this should be an ecosystem, that whoever gets to play with this beautiful tool that we've built gets to do their own best work with it. The offering, the product will continue to reflect the specific talents and worldviews of the group of the moment, and you can't avoid that culture from the past continues to continues to color what happens in the present. I mean, I love the rule of first successful settlement, which is, it's really about human settlements, human cultures, it's like, for example, New York was founded by the Dutch. There's almost no Dutch population here anymore, but the culture continues to be fairly strongly commercial, global.
Internationalist, yeah.
Yeah, internationalist, right. Yeah.
Tolerant.
Yeah, fairly tolerant. Yeah, exactly. So it's apparently a what do you call it? A sociology, principle. I recognize that. I mean, the original ETHEL ethos of hard hitting, we can play the rock. We'll surprise you how hard hitting a string quartet can be, and we kind of treasure that. Me and Ralph, we don't want to let go of it. We'll see what happens when we're out of the picture, but that doesn't matter as much as this culture of supporting each other, of just sharing the risks, sharing the benefits, and doing better, doing more together than you could do by yourself.
Something that I love very much about the state of creative music, and that I think ETHEL manifests is that notion of almost like post-genre or pan-genre. You could say it lots of different ways, the blending of uptown and downtown, or, however you want to view it. But my sort of era in New York, and we all have our New Yorks, mine was very much influenced by sort of the downtown, the Knitting Factory, and all the different John Zorn projects. And so he's another one that, of course, we could be talking about a hardcore project, or we could be talking about a string quartet or a chamber guitar suite, or, it's such a beautiful, beautiful, limitless conception of what music is. A lot of the artists I speak with here are working within those same sort of spiritual realms. They may know about these artists a lot, or they may not at all, but they're blending electroacoustic music now, or jazz and electronic instrumentation, just so many different worlds now, and people are not self-conscious about it. But what strikes me more than anything else is there's audience. May not be Carnegie Hall, but there's audience at coffee shops and jazz clubs and performance spaces and theater, local pop-up theater things, galleries. It's really beautiful when 50 to 150 people come together to see these creative musics. Have you recognized those currents of having always been there? Or, because in my mind, I don't know if it's my age or when I was aware of it, but it seems like a post-90s thing, maybe even a post-hip-hop thing.
Well, yes. Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I mean, I love your description. I think you're absolutely right in that. And I get joy in all of that. Following on my argument that I believe the big hurdle around the millennium was largely economic, that the restraints, like I lived with it, and I do believe that there were restraints on the system that said, no. If we allow too many voices, if we allow too many colors, if we let these reprobates over here who are writing, jazz and rock-based music, if we let them in, there won't be as much for the rest of us. Or, the highest, most affluent people would get less. So we were, like I say, I feel ETHEL was among that early wave, that first wave that just breached the wall. And that was our opportunity. Then the wave was gone. The wave passed, and it became normal. Like I do think that since 2000, that the media has wildly expanded, and it really was something that had to happen. It wasn't not going to happen. It's just that there was a lot of resistance to it before the millennium, and then that just kind of evaporated. So you go to Carnegie Hall now, you listen to one of the classical big soloists, doing their beautiful, polished performances. They will almost always include an encore of a jazz style or something. They'll show you they can do more than one trick. And I do think that became not only the norm, but imperative, that you blend more than one skill set. You could be a violinist who also sings. You could be a pianist who can also drum or has a dance step, but you needed more than one thing to set you apart, to show people that you were not only traditionally good at something, but you were someone to watch. You were someone with a creative core. We're people of that environment. We believe in it. We think it's very productive. We always give younger artists that advice. If you can think of at least two things that you love, you do well, you can represent, you'll go way farther. You'll get way more updraft,
That's sort of the limits of my ability to speak about this with any kind of kind of authority. So I'm gonna sort of speculate vulnerably, and you could tell me how off base I am. But that also seems it's within a tradition of Mahler, or even composers going much further back into the Romantic period or where have you, drawing on folk musics. And these were people who were wide-ranging in their knowledge of music and various artistic traditions, and they could pull from it. And in retrospect, we look at it and we say, were they being cheeky? Were they making fun of, or were they on? Like, we don't know unless there's documentation left, but they were sort of multilingual in that way.
Yes. And that's where they got a lot of their inspiration. That's how they stayed young, you know. Admittedly, the 19th century was the period of like nationalist music where they were drawing specifically to be more relevant to their own people, their own cultures. But the separation that started to happen between expert musicians, experts who were uniquely highly trained to do just that one thing. Again, this was a separation that got more and more exaggerated through the 20th century. You know, the earlier generations, yes, they, you know, you could be in Bach's time engaged as a court musician. You could specialize as a violinist. People had trades, and they would pass those skills along father to son. So there were specializations, but the idea that there was somehow high music and low music was something that became way more defined and structured in the 20th century, you know. And we, of course, we do work quite substantially with people of other cultures, or, you know, and we want to be that agent of connection, of communication, understanding each other better. We focused more and more on that particular activity. And we do travel and meet people in their home environments. And we ask them to please let us experience a little bit about what music is in their lives. And it's very, very unusual in the world. It's very unusual for people to locate music as a practice for experts and pay experts to do it. From almost all cultures, it's just something you do yourself. It's something you do at home. It's something you keep a guitar in the corner. It's not an expertise. It's a birthright and a necessary practice. It's something that people do to stay sane and be able to communicate their love and their sadness and their, you know, just heal each other, share things. We really enjoy that idea of the applied art, something that you actually just use because it's good for you.
What is the home-baked commissioning program, I guess I would call it, where the quartet is focusing on early career composers or new composers? What do you look for in a composer or in a piece? Like what is the thing that helps drive a decision? To the extent you're comfortable doing it, could you talk a little bit about the decision-making process? Like, you know, it's an even number ensemble. Do you get 2 votes, or how does that happen?
Oh, that's great. That's so, oh my God, you're so wise. It's true. That is something we've run up against, you know, like, oh, we can have a dead tie. Yeah, that's hard.
You call Ron Carter?
Well, I could think of worse people to call, frankly. What we do in that rare eventuality is we have long conversations about things. We actually just reach an agreement. We just say, there's this, or this. And it may take time. People just need to be fully expressed about things that they're concerned or worried about or just don't feel related to. In the case of this commissioning project, we did a number grading system on the applications, you know, because the composers submitted biographies and work samples. From their samples, we got some picture of their style, their perspective, the way they approach it. And we just numbered our choices and tabulated the numbers. So the numbers could be more nuanced than just straight yes or no. It was, 1 to 5 or something like that. And then we just take the top few and talk about them and decide, well, you know, it's never perfect. And we never want anyone to imagine that we think of this as a value system. It's not grading. We're not grading anybody. This is
It's a decision matrix.
Yeah. And all it is our agreeing on what music we want to play. It's not about how good a composition is. In fact, many times over the years, we've received applications supported by materials that were just very, very classical. And we just said, it's just not our range. It's not what we do. It's not what we're good at, so it does. We actually feel fairly confident about a lot of that process. And it's because it's only based on what we enjoy doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Could you tell me a little bit about, I don't know if you'd call it a residency, but the time you spend at the balcony bar performing? Something I'm very curious about that is it strikes me as particularly intimate, if I could say it that way. But I'm curious about, what do you get from that as performers, as an ensemble, other than the ability to sort of, I guess, play with some regularity, but shape you? How does it impact you?
It has been priceless. We've had this, just for whoever might be in New York, we have an appearance there is music at the Metropolitan Museum every single weekend, all year round, on Friday and Saturday nights during their late opening hours. And it's always there's a cafe or a bar on the balcony right over the main entrance doors. You can hear it when you walk into the museum. There's music happening and it's right over your head. We program it, actually, and we play it as often personally as we can, as often as we can all be there. But we also book in other great artists who do their own music, and it's loads of fun.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
It's great. Yeah. And a huge insight on the part of the museum that this was going to be an art moment, an art space, not just, background music, so no, it's
pretty hip. It's pretty hip.
It's more like a cabaret, really, so and we get to talk to people. So socially, it's been invaluable. We've actually made dear, I'm sure for the rest of our lives, friends that we've watched each other growing older for 10 years now, we just adore each other. That's one of the things for musicians that I think it's hard to imagine, but our product, our art form has to be sat with. You need people to spend time with you, because you can't imagine a piece of music just there it is, like by the title. There you go. Like persist. Nobody knows what that means. But if you can get people to sit with you, spend time, get familiar with your vibe, talk to you for a minute, there's a different level of connection and infection that happens. It's like you really get more of the sense, and we get to stay in touch with what our audience is really talking about, what they're interested in, what their concerns in life are. We've tried programs there that we were just building music that we needed to really learn. And we've been able to try it out, get good at it at the museum, and then take it to the concert halls, and that's just this sheer time on the bandstand. That makes a gigantic difference to a performer. The Beatles, I like to remember that. The Beatles had a residency at a club in Berlin for like 2 years before they broke in, and they really just slammed it. They just fine-tuned their sound, their material. When they hit the big time, they actually were ready to just do it, just play. So we have been as grateful for that as for any other opportunity in our lives.
Thank you so much, Dorothy Lawson. And as always, thank you for listening to Spotlight On. Spotlight On is executive produced and hosted by me, Lawrence Purrier. We're produced and marketed by Michael Donaldson. Editing and sound design is by Terry Grant. Our theme music is by Q Burn's Abstract Message. The most important member of our team is you. Thank you for supporting our work. Please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and then visit us online at spotlightonpodcast.com. There you'll find our free episode archive, our online store, and a link to make a donation to support our work. Thanks for listening, be safe, and stay in touch.